Welcome to a new edition of the Polyglot Activist, Learn Languages, Make a Difference. My name is Dr. Carlos Yebra Lopez, and today I have the pleasure of speaking to you about the fundamental paradox. Although polyglots speak a variety of languages, sometimes they seem to struggle to presuppose the same ability in their interlocutors. This is what I call the ideology of the monolingual other. In exploring this fundamental question, I came across a very interesting book by the title of Beyond the Mother Tongue, the Post-Monolingual Condition. As you can see on the screen, its author is Jasmine Yildiz, who is an associate professor of German and comparative literature at UCLA. Now, if we go to the introduction of this very book, we will observe the following. There, Yildiz defines the ideology of the monolingual other in the following terms. She says, according to this paradigm, which is the monolingual paradigm, individuals and social formations are imagined to possess one true language only, their mother tongue, and through this possession to be organically linked to an exclusive, clearly demarcated ethnicity, culture, and nation. All right, so how does the polyglot ideology of the monolingual other operate in practice? And here I want to be very clear. I will not be naming names. Why? Because I'm not interested in criticizing people or exposing them or calling them out. I'm interested in discussing ideas, and in particular in dismantling linguistic ideologies that are pernicious and that prevent us from building more inclusive societies. That's what I'm interested in. And so consider, for instance, this. There are a number of memes and tweets, Facebook posts, etc., that go something along the lines of this. How do you say X and Y in your language? For instance, how to say I love you in your language. Wishing you a happy festive season and peaceful new year. How do you say this in your language? Now, this seems to presuppose that language is a property, is something you own, and not only that, that you also only own one language. How do you say this in your language? Both presuppositions are operating here. However, one could object to this that, oh, I'm just talking about your native language. I'm just talking about your mother tongue. Well, these categories are also very problematic. These biologicist categories, which some authors have described as neo-racist, presuppose that language is a biological entity, which is not. We are not born into languages. Languages are not biological entities. They are socio-cultural constructs that are acquired and lost to different degrees throughout our whole lives. So this is one example. A further example is the idea of language tourism. Now, language tourism looks something like this. These are real titles from YouTube videos. And again, I'm not naming names. I'm not saying what the name of that channel is, but I'm saying that these notions are problematic. So for instance, I gave strangers €5 if I didn't speak their language. Again, we are aggressively, in my opinion, boxing people in and saying, okay, this is your essence. This is who you are. You speak this language, therefore you are of this nation. Therefore, I can make a number of assumptions on you. I reduce you to a language, and in doing so, I do not acknowledge your complexity, the fact that maybe you even have contradictory affiliations, or that you feel identified with a particular aspect of a given language, but in other areas you relate more to another language, so that you don't consider any given language your own language. This is even more problematic. White guy shocks African market by speaking their language. This is problematic on so many levels. First, on their language assumption. Second, there seems to be a racial contrast between a white guy and then an African market, as if those were mutually exclusive, as if there are no white African people. etc., etc. So I think this is very, very problematic. And then the last case would be that of realizing that your interlocutor is also a polyglot. What happens, for instance, when I say I'm learning German? My first language is English, right? So I go to Germany and then I ask for directions in German. And my interlocutor answers back to me in very good English. Realizing that I'm struggling to articulate my words in German, he or she answers back to me in very good English. Now I have two options. Either I continue the conversation in English, or I try to push further the option of speaking in German. So what I think happens sometimes within the polyglot community is that because the language you are so invested in learning is German, in this case, you want to push that person to speak to you in your preferred language, in this case, German. So there are two ways of going about this. You can politely ask that, or you can even demand that. Of course, demanding is not an option. You are not entitled to the other person speaking to you in your preferred language. You can ask for it, but of course you're not entitled to it. Now, if you ask for it, the other person may choose to engage and speak back to you in German, perhaps at a slower pace so you can understand every word, or disengage and say, no, I'm just speaking to you in English because I don't think you're competent enough to have a conversation in German, or because I'm in a rush and I don't want to waste time with you, etc., etc. Now, understand that if you are pushing that person to speak in your preferred language, the fact that that person agrees to speak in that language doesn't mean it was a free choice. It might be the case that you made that person feel as if she had no choice but agreeing with you to speak in that language, which to me is not okay. To me, really, that person shouldn't feel pressured to speaking to you in a given language just because that's the language that you happen to be learning and you're eager to improve on that. Again, I don't think you're entitled to the language ability of other people. And I would like to conclude this video with a brief reflection on why this happens in the first place. Why is there such a thing as the polyglot ideology of the monolingual other to begin with? And let me know what you think in the comments down below in the video. But as far as I'm concerned, there are at least 3 reasons why this is the case. Now, first, there are political reasons. As we know, the monolingual paradigm was born in modernity and was particularly acute in the 18th, 19th, 20th, and now the 21st century. It's the idea that one nation corresponds to one language. And this thought and paradigm was disseminated through state policy and language planification. Now, so much so that we've come to internalize the idea that most people are monolingual and multilingualism is the exception to the rule. Now, this historically and currently is not the case. There are still more multilingual people in the world than there are monolinguals. Monolinguals are the exception, not the rule. Now, in addition to political reasons, the second reason I think is a desire for authenticity, particularly in a globalized world where boundaries, ethnicities, nations are getting more and more blurred, are getting less and less clear. So we subconsciously try to hang on to a perception of clear and well-defined boundaries between languages, nations, cultures, and people. And finally, there is also a polyglot ego investment. Now, what do I mean by this? I mean that the idea of the indigenous, local, monolingual other is the other side of the coin of the cosmopolitan polyglot. It's the Hegelian dialectics between the slave and the owner. There will be no owner without the slaves and no slaves without owner. So it's almost as if the self-flattering image that we as polyglots have of being cosmopolitan feeds off the condescending fantasy that there is a large mass of people who are monolingual others. And my question for you today is, can we find ways to uplift ourselves and think of ourselves positively as refined, sophisticated, multilingual, etc., cosmopolitan, while lifting other people up as well, while not downplaying the complexity of other people, while not reducing other people to this little box of being the monolingual other. So I hope this was useful for you, and as always, I'll see you folks in the next video. Thank you.